Did you know that every word you speak matters? Are your conversations making a difference? With a passion for words and a heart for conversation, Teresa Velardi is a self-professed word nerd, best-selling author, BizCat 360 columnist, and publisher. Children's books as well as fiction and nonfiction books are welcomed at We Be Books Publishing and Book Endeavors, the imprints of her company, Authentic Endeavors Publishing. Whether written or spoken, Teresa strives to encourage and inspire meaningful conversations that make a difference. Here's the host of Conversations That Make a Difference, Teresa Velardi.
Hey everyone, and welcome to this edition of Conversations That Make a Difference. I am Teresa Velardi, and my guest today is Peter Canova, who just published Quantum Spirituality. We'll be talking about that in just a minute. First, a few things before we get started. I just want to let you know that Conversations That Make a Difference is live every Tuesday. It's live. It's available every Tuesday at 5 in the morning and 5 in the evening, but we go live on the first and third Tuesday of the month. So you can hear Conversations That Make a Difference and Dream Vision 7 Radio Network on your car, on YouTube, and you can also put it on your phone or ask Alexa to play Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. So thanks for joining us. And before we get started, I usually start with the Serenity Prayer. So let's do that. And then I'll introduce you to my guest today, Peter Canova. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I would also like to say that it is by God's grace that we are fabulous, blessed, and highly favored, living in our greatness, using our gifts and talents, making a difference in the lives of others with passion and purpose, and all of God's great universe is conspiring in our favor. And so together we say, amen. And we're going to be talking about some of what quantum spirituality is about. And the author, Peter Canova, is an international businessman who decided to write novels after undergoing a series of spiritual experiences that altered the course of his life. Peter had a strong affinity for writing and communicating. In the early 2000s, he acted on this talent, winning a grand literary prize for his very first short story at the highly respected Santa Barbara's Writers' Conference in California. Shortly thereafter, his first book, he took first place out of 500 entries in Francis Ford Coppola's online Zoetrope magazine. Did I say that correctly? Zoetrope?
Zoetrope.
Okay, Zoetrope. Okay. For his first publicly circulated short story, which is The Blood of Our Departed. That right there is an interesting topic. Peter continued his track record of writing excellence with the publication of the First Souls Trilogy, the 3 books, Pope Annalisa, the 13th Disciple, and The Light of the Distant Sun in this saga about the first fall of spirit consciousness into material existence. And the books have won 25, yes, I said 25, literary awards, including Nautilus, Writer's Digest, and Eric Hoffer. The captivating tales speak to Peter's recurrent theme, the origin, purpose, and destiny of humanity, grounded on quantum science and the ancient universal spiritual tradition lost to the West for 2,000 years. Peter has also been honored as a Chicken Soup for the Soul author, and he has, as I said, just his newly published book, Quantum Spirituality, is nonfiction. And it's a study of the stunning parallels between ancient spiritual wisdom and the theories of modern quantum physics. There's so much in here. I feel like I want to read this whole bio for you because he's just so amazing. People have called Peter the real live Robert Langdon after the main character of the Da Vinci Code. And if you've read that, I definitely see that in you, Peter. For people who have read the Da Vinci Code will get a taste of that today. Like the fictional character, Peter is recovering and decoding the complexities of quantum physics and the secret wisdom of mystical texts such as the Kabbalah and the once forbidden Gnostic Gospels. I want to know more about that. He does so in a manner few scholars have ever done before. His material is correlated to science and based not only in extensive research, but on his own startling personal spiritual encounters. Peter has been the subject of numerous radio and television interviews. He has had 3 appearances in 1 year on the nationally acclaimed Coast to Coast show with George Norrie. He has also appeared on stage with many noted personalities in the consciousness raising field. And as a national speaker, as well as through his books and articles, he demonstrates how the Gnostic texts used myth, the narrative device of its time to describe the Big Bang, parallel universes, holographic universe theory, Einstein's relativity, and Jung's theory of the unconscious mind. He transforms these complex concepts into page-turning learning material, making the information accessible to the average reader. His hope is that this knowledge will help people envision a new personal spiritual paradigm that transcends dogmatic religion and materialistic science. Peter described the motivation behind all of his work in a Huffington Post interview. He says, no work can be personally transformative unless it engages both the heart and the mind of the viewer or the reader. To be touched intellectually is to be affected. To be touched emotionally is to be moved. To be touched by both is to be raised to a new perception of being. Helping people achieve that is my goal in life. And so for more information on Peter's work, please visit his websites, petercanova.com and popeannalisa.com. Peter Canova, welcome to Conversations That Make a Difference. It's so good to have you here.
Well, thanks, Teresa. I think I'm going to have to cut down on that biography. Hopefully everybody didn't go to sleep during that segment.
No, but I mean, there's so many interesting pieces in there for me anyway, because I'm like all about this. I'm all about this. You and I have had many conversations about, some of the topics that you cover in this book. So, but first, for people who don't know what quantum spirituality is, can you define that for us, please?
Yeah, well, quantum spirituality is really about how we can raise consciousness using science and mysticism as twin yardsticks. And that indicates that our physical world is actually a virtual or a holographic projection of forces from other planes of existence, the sum total of which we call reality. Really, what the book is trying to do is provide a knowledge base for the readers to have extraordinary experiences, with consciousness, personal experiences, revelations. And, there's really 4 elements that I guess I kind of basically deal with when I'm trying to impart information to people. And that is, you have faith, you have belief, you have knowledge and revelation. So the thing about faith and belief and even knowledge is they're not necessarily correct. And I'll give you an example. If you were a novice being to the world and had no experience, and somebody told you that water burns, you might take it on faith that they're correct. You might read somewhere that water burns, and that further, instills your belief system with the correctness of the fact that water burns. But until you put your hand in the water and you realize it doesn't burn, you really don't know the truth of it. So when you gain knowledge, there's 2 types of knowledge. There's factual knowledge, like what you're going to get from listening to me today or reading a book is factual knowledge. But there's also experiential knowledge. And experiential knowledge is when you actually experience something. In other words, it's the difference between told that fire burns and sticking your hand in the fire. Then you have the truth of it. So that's a higher form of knowledge. And once you embody or you embrace that higher knowledge and you use it in whatever your own practice might be, or your own meditation, your own thoughts, it can actually lead to revelations, which are the highest form of knowledge. They're a direct experience with the consciousness that brought us all here. So what I'm trying to do through quantum spirituality is provide a framework using science and using ancient mysticism in order to put people in an arena with an X and Y axis of science and mystic wisdom that can further their knowledge base, that they can use to understand that there is something out there at the end of the rainbow. There is more to life than what we see. There are other realities out there. And I want to help launch people along that path. And that's why I wrote the book.
Wow. You said so much there. The first question I want to ask you is, can you control the realities that you're in? Do you have the capability of controlling which timeline or which reality that you might be in consciously, or is that something that you, once you're here and you have this experience?
Well, yes and no. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. Sometimes, it just takes you where it wants to lead you. Other times, you can maybe channel that along a little bit, but that gets into the fact that, we are, at the end of the day, all part of the consciousness that created everything. We're not, and I want to really emphasize this as the point I make in the book. We are not creations of anything. Okay. God never created anything. God, and incidentally, you can call it the supreme consciousness, the one, the force, doesn't make any difference. Whatever you want to call it, it doesn't really care. It is what it is. But, the force that brought us into being did not create us. It emanated us. And the difference between creation and emanation is, creation is when you make something separate from yourself. It would be like Geppetto making the puppet Pinocchio. Okay. Mm-hmm. Emanation is when something flows out from the source. It's actually a projection of the essence of the source itself. So there really is no separation. The only separation is an apparent separation, because usually the projections from the source have a limited consciousness, and so are only have a limited awareness of the whole. But that doesn't indicate that we're still not part of that whole. We're part of that whole with limited awareness. So there's a big difference there when you really come to think of it, because what that really says is that the whole force behind creation, the force of consciousness behind creation, includes us. We're part of that stream of consciousness. We modulate that consciousness as it descends down through the various planes, right down, let's say, to the bottom level here of physical experience. So we're part of that whole process of creation that brought us here, even though we may not be aware of it, because, as I said, we're operating out of limitations. But part of what quantum spirituality is trying to do is provide you information so that you can unlimit yourself in effect. You can start to really reconnect with the wholeness and reconnect with that greater source of power. And we do have the ability to do that. We have the ability to grow, and we have the ability to start to recognize the operation of consciousness in our own lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how does quantum physics come into the play of this? And how is it distinct from any other sciences that are out there?
Yeah, well, I probably should tell you how I got into this and what led me, to quantum physics. So,
yes.
As you said in the introduction, I long ago and far away, when I was in my 20s, I had some very vivid experiences that you would call psychic experiences or revelations. And I found out that I was a very accurate medical intuitive, and I started to experience all kinds of things: clairaudience, clairvoyance, remote viewing, and a lot of things that I never really expected, never really understood, were part of my makeup, in effect. And once I got over the sort of questioning and disbelief of this, and I just let it happen, it opened up a lot of channels of information that really affected my life, which is why I left quite a bit of money on the table. And I still am very active in business, but not as active as I was, because I have to devote another part of my life to doing, this now. And being a Capricorn, I wasn't really satisfied to just have the experiences. I kind of wanted to understand the nuts and bolts behind it. So I started doing a lot of research, and the research led me into the field of quantum physics. And unlike other branches of science, quantum physics pretty much deals, at the end of the day, if you want to carry it through to its logical conclusion, it has to deal with the same things that mysticism deals with, which is that, what are the forces that that surround us? What are the forces that we're subject to? And where did all this come from? And where is it all leading to? I mean, you can have like a lot of scientists, for instance, they know how to manipulate energy, let's say, but they don't know what energy is. They don't know where it comes from, and they don't know the source of the energy. And all they know is that they can manipulate it in certain ways. Okay.
Mhm.
But, ultimately, there are now branches of quantum physics, especially theoretical quantum physics, that try to, trace all those forces back. They're trying to understand what they're about and where they come from and where we fit in. And so, of course, that gets into the creation and, other philosophical issues of like the origin and destiny of humanity. So out of all the other sciences, quantum physics, which deals with the fundamentals of existence, of physical existence, naturally starts to fade into these almost like metaphysical type questions.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah, I think of I just got a flash of what's the guy's name from the Big Bang Theory, that he's constantly, he studies string theory and quantum sciences, and they all come together. So people call quantum physics just completely mind-blowing, and that's the feeling that I get. So
Yeah.
because it's just so huge and encompasses everything that is out there, as far as I know. And so why is it that it's so mind-blowing, and how is it that somebody can come to understand a little bit more, besides, of course, reading your book?
Well, first I'll tell you why it's mind-blowing, and then I'll answer the second part of the question. It's mind-blowing because the subatomic or quantum world is the world from which this world arises, but it's completely counterintuitive. It seems like it has nothing to do with the macroscopic world. There's so many things in there that just don't make sense. So now let me give you a little bit of quantum history here.
Okay.
In the early 1900s, a brilliant German physicist named Max Planck started to study the properties of light energy. And what he found was that light, and incidentally, light is the basis of existence, because without light, we couldn't perceive the real world. It's the photons of light that reflect or bounce off of objects that allow us to perceive them. If there was no light, we would not perceive anything out there. The world would be basically a blank. And Max Planck studied the properties of light, and he realized that light does not come in continuous flow. It comes in little packets of energy, like frames passing through the projector of a film. It comes in package of energy he called quanta. So that's where we got the term quantum physics. Now, Max Planck was a very interesting person because he was the father of quantum physics, and yet he said some things that sound very, very mystical. He said that all matter is brought to vibration by a hidden force, and this force is what makes matter visible. And he said that the product of this world was that of an intelligent mind. Behind all matter is an intelligent mind, and so that the world essentially is operating like almost off of a giant consciousness. And this has been echoed by many others. The astronomist Jeans and Thuring, they had some very similar quotes to Max Planck, saying that instead of the universe looking like a giant machine, as in Newtonian physics and quantum physics, it looks more like a giant thought. It looks more like the product of a giant thought. So now we have Albert Einstein come along with his famous equation, E equals mc squared. And what Einstein discovered was that matter and energy are the same things. Matter comes from light energy, and it resolves back into energy. So that's the basis for the atomic bomb. The atomic bomb is literally breaking down matter down to the subatomic level and releasing that energy. And that's what creates the nuclear force. But essentially, Einstein said that matter is formed, solid matter, or what we believe is solid matter, is formed from invisible, unsolid light energy. That's a fact, okay? That's not really a conjecture. That's pretty much an accepted fact right now. And we had we had several other developments in physics, like classic experiments that showed they call it the double slit experiment. And I won't go into the genesis of that term, but these experiments show that at the most fundamental subatomic levels, there are no such thing as particles. Now, I want to repeat that because we were all led to believe that particles is the basis of what makes up this supposedly solid world of ours, okay? Mm-hmm. Well, the fact of the matter is that at the most basic levels, no particles exist. What exists is waves of energy, waves of light energy. And that was proved in these experiments. And when what we recognize as subatomic particles like atoms are only 1% mass and 99% light, space, and energy. So we focus on the 1% and we ignore the 99% because we really don't perceive it. But you see, it's sort of like we're just the tip of an iceberg and there's much more lying beneath us that supports what supposedly this physical reality is. So this is right away, you sort of start to see, well, now, isn't the world kind of an illusion? Because honestly, you know, we generate from essentially light energy, and yet we think that we're these solid beings walking around in a solid world, but that's not really the case. We're more like electromagnetic signatures that we perceive by the play of light, bouncing off of each other. So there are some other, a couple of other steps that I can sort of, describe here that led to, the belief that we're living in a virtual or holographic world. I can get into that if you want, but I don't want to carry on too long here without giving people a mental break.
It's fascinating to me. It's like I have heard the theories of no particles and the waves of light. I heard that I've heard that before. And so there are, I could stay in this conversation with you forever, but let's move on to something where we can bring in the audience as well. But you know what? Before we get started on anything else, we do have to take a break. So let's just go through that right now. And we'll be returning just in a couple of minutes with Peter Canova, author of Quantum Spirituality. We'll be right back.
What if dreams can diagnose your life? What if we can meet the love of our life in dreams? Join host Kat O'Keefe Canavas, the #1 internationally best-selling author of Dreams That Can Save Your Life, written with Duke University medical doctor Larry Berg. Dreaming Healing is where we'll explore dreams, research, and interpret dreams from you, the caller. Dreaming Healing shows can be heard every Tuesday at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. Eastern, with live shows on the first and third evenings at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific Time on syndicated Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. Come live your dreams out loud with Kat.
Are miracles real? Can you move from mayhem to miracles? 30 prominent authors say yes as they share their high fives and down lows of challenges, abuse, addiction, and love. Experience hope, the magic elixir of miracles, through the personal stories of New York Times bestselling authors James Redfield, Dr. Bernie Siegel, Sister Jenna, Reverend Temple Hayes, and many more. If you like bestsellers, chaos to clarity, and crappy to happy, you'll love crying and laughing through mayhem to miracles. Sacred stories of transformational hope. Available now on Amazon and in bookstores worldwide.
Did you know that every word you speak matters? What you say and how you say it can make or break a relationship or shift the outcome of any situation. Are your conversations making a difference? Faith in God, gratitude, authenticity, and giving are Teresa Velardi's heart. It's in this spirit that she's focused on making a difference in the lives she's blessed to touch. Conversations That Make a Difference is now on syndicated Dream Vision 7 Radio Network every Tuesday at 5 a.m. and 5 p.m. Eastern Time, with live call-in shows every first and third Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
Everybody, welcome back. We're here with Peter Canova, author of Quantum Spirituality, and we're talking about quantum physics. And I would like to move on to the Gnosticism part of this conversation and the mystical teachings. So one of the questions that I want to ask is probably, what is the difference? Well, first of all, who were the Gnostics and what were their beliefs? Let's go there first.
Yeah, well, in the ancient world, there was a universal spiritual tradition. Sometimes it's called the perennial philosophy, and it had common beliefs that were present in all the various cultures: Hindu, Persian, Hellenistic, Greek, Zoroastrian, Judaism, and so forth, Kabbalistic Judaism, and so forth. And there was some differentiation, obviously, over the millennia, but the Gnostics occupied a very interesting role because they were centered in the Greek city of Alexandria, Egypt, and it was one of the great cities of the ancient world. It had the great library. It was probably the greatest source of knowledge, much surpassing Athens and Rome. And the Gnostics were essentially the melting pot for all these various mystic traditions. And they were probably the most scientific, I would say, of all the various traditions, because the Gnostic masters would cross over to the other side, essentially, in consciousness, and they would bring back information. And this information was just, mind-blowing. In fact, this was really, in my mind, and one of the theses of the book is that they essentially predated and predicted all the major modern theories of quantum physics 2,000, 3,000 years ago. So they predated Christianity. But when Jesus began his ministry, they became amongst the first Christians because they recognized that he was teaching a Gnostic message. And so they became among the first Christians, and they were a huge block of the original church, of the ancient church. The Gnostics were, a huge sect within the Christian community back then. Very influential. And even today, with all the suppression and everything that the Gnostic teachings went through, you still see major vestiges of Gnosticism in Christianity today, even though it's been branded as heresy by the church. So anyway, as I said, that they became amongst the first Christians. They were, they went from being Gnostic pagans to Gnostic Christians because the message was a universal message, and they believed that that's what Jesus was teaching. So they looked at him as a great Gnostic teacher. And incidentally, we do have many indications, both in the Bible and in letters of church fathers, that indicate Jesus was teaching a secret teaching. In the Bible itself, it says, unto those without he spoke parables, but to the disciples he gave the keys to the kingdom within. We have letters from Origen and Clement of Alexandria, two of the early and most influential Christian bishops from Alexandria, attesting to the fact that Jesus had a secret gospel, which was not divulged to the masses for fear of the fact that they would not comprehend them or understand them. So the teachings were only given to those few elect who could, really grasp the nature of what Jesus was saying. But what happened was the church kind of evolved in two different directions. You had the inner mystical church, which was incidentally largely led by females in those days. Okay, Mary Magdalene and other females were largely the leaders of the early mystical church. But then you had the outer or the Orthodox church, which was the church of the parables, the church of the more superficial teachings, love thy neighbor, and so forth and so on. But the Orthodox eventually gained ascendancy, maybe because they were just easier to understand, for the people, like, come to us and we'll absolve you kind of thing. But they literally destroyed their fellow Christians. I mean, they burnt their writings, they expelled them from the churches, and later on even physically exterminated them. And we lost a tremendous amount of spiritual wisdom in the West with the loss of the Gnostic teachings.
But I've seen books of the Gnostic teachings that are out. As a matter of fact, I have one that I just recently obtained. And I'm not familiar with a lot of them, but I certainly I've always questioned, I'm a student of the Bible, and I've always questioned, there is no way that Jesus didn't have something to say that should have been made part of the Bible. But instead, I'm hearing you say right now that there are Gospels of Jesus, and I'm sure there are many, many more books that never got put into the Bible. And the question that I have is, when I crack open that book on the Gnosticism, on the Gnostics that I have teachings, am I going to find some of that in there?
Well, there were a tremendous amount of gospels floating around in the early days. Mm-hmm. And there were, over a period of time, certain people took it upon themselves to decide what should and what should not be included in the Bible. There's the Apocrypha, and there's other texts. Now, the Gnostics actually occupy a whole different set of what the church has called heretical teachings, okay? Because some of these extra biblical gospels are still in existence. And the church doesn't think they rise to the occasion of putting them into biblical canon, but they also don't really make a big deal out of them. But then the Gnostic things, they it's like anathema. They tremendously fear the Gnostic text, because for one thing, what the Gnostics were saying is much what quantum physics says, which is that you have the ability to become your own prophet. That Jesus, Jesus was a son of God, but he was not the only son or daughter of God, that everybody has the spark of the divine within them. And that what we really need is not so much repentance, but remembrance of what lies within. We have that spark of consciousness in all of us, and it can awaken in all of us, and we can all have revelations and revelatory experiences. But of course, this was very threatening to the Orthodox Church that was developing this whole hierarchy of priests and bishops and archbishops and popes and everything else. This was a very threatening message to them, so they needed to eradicate it.
Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of information in here about the Carmel Essenes, and a bunch of different points that you put in here about Jesus himself that I find extremely interesting. And although I have not read the whole book, I'm like, all right, what's next? And now, how does all of this fit together? How does the mysticism and the quantum physics fit together into? I know that you talked about creating reality, but can you elaborate on that a little bit more, and on what we were just talking about the Gnostics? And what
sure.
You learn from them relative to this topic?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you some what I would call more superficial similarities, and then we can do a deeper dive into something that shows just how precise the Gnostics were in predicting quantum physics. Okay. So, we, as we discussed, modern science says that light is the means by which we perceive phenomenal reality, and the Gnostics were teaching that God is light. God is the light, intelligent presence that forms reality in all its various degrees and influences. And the science says that matter comes from energy, as we just discussed. The Gnostics said this, taught the same thing, that all matter comes from energy, from spiritual energy. The science is coming to the belief, and we didn't really get into the whys of this. We might have to save that for another time, but there's a reason that there's a growing perception, and it has to do with, interestingly enough, with the study of black holes, that is leading more and more people in science to believe that we are part of a holographic universe. We're essentially living in a holographic projection where each little part of the hologram contains the image of the whole. Okay, there's several different scientific experiments and discoveries that have brought them to the threshold of that belief. Well, the Gnostics basically said the same thing. The Gnostics said that the spirit, the material world, is an illusion that is just perceived by our limited consciousness, but it is not the reality, is not the ground or fundamental reality. So, the world appears as a universal thought construct. Believe it or not, that's starting to be a growing belief in science. The Gnostics were 2,000 years ahead of them when they said, the world is a pattern in the supreme mind. But if you want to really get into something that is, to me, was mind-blowing, okay,
Yes.
and really demonstrates the nexus between Gnosticism and quantum physics, you have to get into the central Gnostic creation story. And the Gnostic creation story basically said that there is a universal consciousness that is everything. It is the source of all energy and all matter, all appearances, everything that can exist in reality. And this source consciousness projected out other points of consciousness from itself. It emanated, as we discussed at the beginning of the interview. It did not create anything. It projected out, or it emanated other points of intelligent consciousness, other spiritual beings, in effect.
Mhm.
Now, these spiritual beings, not so much like you see in the church with angels flying around and wings and everything else, and but they were actually vibrations of consciousness, and the Gnostics pictured parallel dimensions surrounding the source of these different points of consciousness. So it sort of worked like this: the dimension or the spiritual entity that would be closest to the source, first projected, would be the closest in consciousness, would have the highest vibration. The next level down, the next dimension down, would be slightly lower level of vibration or consciousness. So, it was kind of like, best analogy I can use is, if you think of making copies of like CDs or something, the original copies have the greatest clarity or fidelity. Each copy of the copy degrades a little bit in clarity. Well, it was the same way it operated in these parallel dimensions of consciousness, that they decreased a little bit in terms of awareness of the source as they were projected further out. Now, there's a reason for that limitation, which is that if you didn't have these limitations on consciousness, there could be no individual experience, right? Because if they all had the same supreme consciousness as the source, then they wouldn't be individuals. They'd be the same as the source. The parts would no longer be the parts; they'd be the whole. So they are parts of the whole, okay? But anyway, the youngest of these spiritual dimensions was called Sophia. And Sophia is a major player in the ancient religious texts, in the Bible. The only reason that we don't recognize that is because we get the English translations. And Sophia means wisdom in Greek. So in the Bible, she was always called wisdom. And right in the Old Testament, it says that I was there at the beginning. She was almost coterminous with a source. She was a very powerful, spiritual figure, but she was the youngest of all these entities. So what is wisdom? How does wisdom grow? How does wisdom learn? It's by experience, right? That's the highest form of learning, is by experience. So Sophia decides that she's going to break the orbit out of the parallel dimensional orbit around the source. And she looks outside and she sees chaos. Now, chaos, which they called it back in the Gnostic text, is the same thing as the quantum field. It's the quantum potential. There's a thing in physics called the quantum foam, or the quantum potential, and it's the area of which these random energies, thrive and whip about, but they haven't really materialized into a physical form. They're still in energetic form. And, this sort of think of it as just a bunch of seething energy. Okay. So that's really what chaos was. So Sophia decides to project her energy, her high energy, call it divine energy, down into chaos. Now, when she goes there, something remarkable happens. Chaos is not empty. It's not a void. And science has discovered there's no such thing as a void in nature. Even what we think of as empty space is seething with virtual particles, energy particles that have not yet come into material form, but still existing as energy. But they're all around there, and they're filling up this void. Sophia goes into chaos, and she's surrounded by something that the Gnostics mind-blowingly called proto-matter, which is matter that does not yet exist as matter. It's matter in potential, okay? This proto-matter swarms around Sophia like iron filings would flock to a magnet. They engulf her, okay? And something really surprising happens. She starts to do something to the vibration of the proto matter, and it starts to become actual physical matter. By the same token, her lowered energy is starting to convert her into matter. This is the first example we have of a matter energy conversion, which Einstein and others discussed. And Sophia cries out to heaven. She's alarmed and she says, "Save me. I'm becoming matter. I'm becoming as lead. Save me from this darkness of matter. I'm being engulfed." Okay. She realizes that she's losing that divine energy, and it's lowering, and it's becoming a different state. This is the origin of physical matter that they're describing, how the energy came from a high state and worked upon these virtual particles, which science knows is out there, and brought it into particle existence. Okay, so couple things. Let's recap here. First of all, we already know that they describe parallel dimensions, okay? Because that was all these dimensions of vibrational consciousness around the source, all right? Second thing is, they're talking about a matter energy conversion. Now, this is what happens to Sophia is an exact description of something your listeners may have heard of called the God particle. The God particle was featured in one of Dan Brown's books. I think may have been in movie. I think it was Angels and Demons. But essentially what the God particle, it's just a sexy word for something that happens. It's a process that happens in our universe. In 2012, they proved that there is a field that surrounds our universe, and it's called the Higgs field. It was theorized for about 50 years, but they finally proved it in 2012 that it's there. And inside the Higgs field, they have these particles or virtual particles. They're basically called Higgs bosons, okay? When energy comes into our universe, and we don't remember, scientists do not know where energy comes from. They don't know what the source of energy is. They can manipulate energies to some extent, but they don't really understand the phenomenon of energy. Any scientist will tell you that. They're at what is energy? I don't know. They're at a blank. So energy comes into our universe. The Higgs bosons cling to the energy streams and slow them down until the energy coagulates down into a lower vibration that becomes visible matter. The same thing, you understand, the same process of the proto-matter surrounding Sophia, slowing down her energy, creating matter, was an exact description of the God particle, the Higgs bosons acting on energy. I mean, it sends like chills in my arms.
I've got chills.
When I think of how accurate they were. Remember, these people did not have technological equipment or even a technological vocabulary. So what they were describing, almost like mythic terms, is about a precise a description as you can get of the operation of the God particle and matter energy conversion, E equals mc squared. Okay, so the next thing
Wait. Hold that thought, because I hate to say this. We have to go to a break. Okay. I'm like really involved here. Just remember where we are, and let's continue this conversation when we come back. More with Peter Canova and quantum spirituality when we return. We'll be right back.
When you think about being healthy and happy, do you consider the 24 areas of your life? Probably not. With the All Things Wellness Wheel, you become self-empowered, allowing you to make healthier decisions about relationships, nutrition, sleep, exercise, stress, and even your value system. The All Things Wellness book series, written by Peggy Wilms and Dr. Marcus Bettstein, teaches about the ATW wheel and brings dozens of true and personal stories from real people. The first of these multi-author books, The Fourfold Formula, features the foreword written by the Celestine Prophecy author, James Redfield, and is now available on Amazon. Reserve your spot now to become a published author in Book 2, Win the Wellness War, We Are Responsible. Visit allthingswellness.com/author for more information.
In a world facing annihilation, a miraculous African nun rises to become the first female pope through a web of war, murder, and betrayal. Loved by some, hated by many, she becomes the deadly target of Islamic terrorists and her own cardinals as she introduces a new vision that will either save humanity or accelerate its destruction. 4 people must race against a nuclear holocaust to learn her astonishing secret. Pope Annalisa is available at petercanova.com, Amazon, and other online booksellers and bookstores worldwide.
Did you know that every word you speak matters? What you say and how you say it can make or break a relationship or shift the outcome of any situation. Are your conversations making a difference? Faith in God, gratitude, authenticity, and giving are Teresa Velardi's heart. It's in this spirit that she's focused on making a difference in the lives she's blessed to touch. Conversations That Make a Difference is now on syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network every Tuesday at 5 a.m. and 5 p.m. Eastern Time, with live call-in shows every first and third Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
Why are we here? How can we be happy? Questions asked from millennials to boomers. Crappy to Happy, Sacred Stories of Transformational Joy answers them using true stories of grit, grace, and love. James Redfield, author of The Celestine Prophecy, wrote in the foreword, "This book is a seminar about emerging truths and offers grounded solutions through the art of the comeback." Dr. Bernie Siegel, a contributing author, wrote, "Bodies die, but spirits and consciousness survive and recycle." So, grab some tissues, open your book, and prepare to cry and laugh till it heals. Crappy to Happy by Reverend Ariel Patricia and Kathleen O'Keefe Canavas. Available from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and booksellers worldwide.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
And we're back with Peter Canova, author of Quantum Spirituality. Get your copy on Amazon. It's available today, so get your copy there. Peter, let's finish talking about Sophia and chaos and how this is relative to quantum spirituality.
Okay, so just to recap where we left off, we know how it described parallel dimensions. We know how it described the God particle. So what happened was that when Sophia contacted these lower virtual particles and essentially activated them into physical matter, a new dimension was created. An entirely new dimension was created, which was it was a dimension of physical matter. Now, it wasn't necessarily the gross physical matter of our world, okay, but it was a finer form. It would have been a finer form of matter. We won't get into the hair splitting of that, but it was a dimension of matter. This dimension of matter could not exist in the spiritual dimension, in those spheres of the spiritual dimension, because it was of a different vibration. So the texts say that it was expelled in a great upheaval and projected apart into another sphere. Big Bang. That's exactly what the Big Bang was, the material world coming from nothing, from we don't know where, from some dimension that we can't see. Another exact description. So, if you take any one of these, you can say, oh, it's coincidence. But, when it adds up, it adds up. And, you start to say, now, wait a minute, there's just too many so-called coincidences here for this to be coincidence anymore. So, it's really quite remarkable that 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, these Gnostic masters were able to go to the other side and bring back information about the creation and understandings about what, the roles that human beings played in the creation. And, I might just say, because I do think it would be of interest to your listeners to elaborate a little bit more on why science is coming to the conclusion that we live in a giant movie, a giant, like a Star Trek kind of holodeck.
Definitely. And let's go there, because I want to know what does that mean for our personal lives, especially like at this time. There's so much craziness in the world. Yeah. Let's bring this together to today's world and how people can use this information and what it means for them as we go through 2023.
Okay, so one of the first indications that we may be living in a simulated reality is the discovery that particles can communicate at vast or infinite distances, really, between one another instantaneously. So to make a more understandable analogy, if there's a Teresa on Earth and a Teresa on Mars, and somebody pinches the Teresa on Earth and you say ouch, the one on Mars says ouch at the exact same time, okay? This is called quantum entanglement. Well, the question arose as to how is that possible? I mean, they weren't communicating by mechanical means, right? They didn't have two tin cans and a piece of string listening to one another on either end, and they didn't have the telephones or any television either. So how is this all possible? Well, they started to theorize that the reason it's possible is because they really aren't two separate things. They're really two appearances of one thing. And that's what a hologram is. A hologram is a whole, and each little part of the whole contains the image of the whole, so that they're like little holes. So that essentially everything in the universe at some level is connecting and communicating with everything else. Now, we may not notice it at the gross macroscopic level, but that's the way it is. So what does that indicate? That indicates that we are a unity. That indicates that we're not the separate beings that we think we are, that we are all connected at a more fundamental level, not only to each other, but to everything else in the entire universe. So then they started to study black holes, which is a very interesting phenomenon. And without going into all the details to confuse the listeners, what they found about black holes was that the information that makes up a black hole, or the information that makes up anything, does not come from inside of that thing. It does not come from the volume. It comes from the outside of the surface. And let me give you an analogy to make that understandable. Let's say you have a bucket, right? Mm-hmm. And the universe is in the bucket. And incidentally, we do have boundaries, and we do have a boundary in the universe. So we are in a form of like a bucket, okay? So let's say the universe is in the bucket, which is you, me, the earth, everything else. Now, you would think that all the information that makes up that universe is inside the bucket, with the appearances, okay? Not the case. The study of black holes tells us that the information is on the outside skin of the bucket, and that it's projected inward to form 3D appearances. Okay, so it's like a movie projector. And this is what they found is the truth of the black holes. And they're extrapolating this to understand that this could very well be the way the universe operates. So essentially, we are surrounded by a flat sheet of two-dimensional energy called Planck lengths, named after Max Planck. And those are the smallest units of energy. And think of them like a quilt that surrounds our world or surrounds our Earth. Basically, the information is being projected from that quilt inward to form what we think of as three-dimensional reality. So it's almost like, if you remember the old Star Trek series where they go into the holodeck and they would have all these very realistic experiences, immersive experiences, and, like they were almost become part of the program. Well, essentially, it seems like we're part of a program, which we had something to do to create, because we're part of the stream of consciousness that created all this, okay? So, it's really interesting stuff. And there is a growing belief. It sounds very trippy and very far out, but there's a growing trend in science to starting to believe this, and starting to believe that there is no such thing as objective reality, that what is out there is a bunch of essentially electromagnetic algorithms that form images that we perceive, and that would include ourselves and all the other things in the world that we perceive. One physicist goes so far as to say when you look away, you destroy it. When you look at it, you create it, in effect. So it's and it's very much in keeping.
I'm sorry. Well, right there, that's the whole principle behind manifestation, isn't it?
Yeah, it's related.
You focus on something, it eventually appears, and when you look away from it, it's gone.
There's definitely the relation there. Yeah. There's definitely a nexus there, and the whole thing about human beings being co-creators. One thing I didn't mention was that in those experiments where it indicated that the basis of reality is light waves, but that when human observation enters into the equation, it collapses into particles. That was one of the most famous experiments. And Niels Bohr, one of the Danish physicists, one of the founders of quantum physics, basically said it's human observation that collapses the energy waves into particles. particle form. So that indicates that we are a part of this stream of consciousness. As I said before, we are not separate from it. We are part of it, and that we modulate effect in these things in effect as part of that conscious stream. We are a bridge, in a sense, as human beings between matter and energy.
Fascinating. So how can we use this today in getting through whatever it is that is going on in this world? And in the Bible, it says that there's a war going on in the heavenlies that is manifesting itself. Will it manifest itself in our reality? So how can people, especially people who are in a place have entered into a place of fear of what's going on in the world. We've come through whatever, COVID, we have all of these crazy things happening politically, and I don't want to get into any of it, but I'm just saying overall, with everything that is going on, and there are people who are living in fear, what's one thing that you can give them related to your topic of quantum spirituality, quantum physics, and the Gnosticism and all of the principles that you have so beautifully discussed with me today? What's one thing you can tell them to take away from this that can calm their spirit in order to be able to get through whatever it is that comes next?
As you grow in consciousness, fear recedes. A lot of what quantum spirituality about is to help us get out of that state by recognizing that there is something else out there. There is a greater power out there. And what I'm trying to do is move people from faith to knowledge of that. Faith is something that you take secondhand from somebody else, but you don't know for certain if it's true. As we discussed earlier, I'm trying to help people with the information with an X and Y axis, of science and mysticism, to understand that there are deeper realities out there. And it's not going to do anybody any good, though, unless they take the bull by the horns and put it into their own practice. Because, again, you can listen to everything I've said here. It can just be an intellectual exercise. In fact, I really encourage people, don't believe a damn thing I just told you. All right. Don't believe in anything I told you. Now, I'm not telling you don't listen to me or don't consider what I'm telling you, but you don't have to believe it. What you do is you take those ideas provisionally and you read the book, for instance, and all the information in the book, okay? And then incorporate it into your own spiritual practice. Try it out. Let it inspire you. The most that I can do is inspire people to a path where they can realize the things that I've said in their own experience, okay? And, the same way that I had these awakening experiences, which for me were spontaneous, and that happens with some people, okay? Most people know. But we all have the ability to have those extraordinary experiences. That's all I'm trying to help you with. I'm trying to help you have those extraordinary experiences. And the information that I'm giving you from science and mysticism should help bolster that, because when you hear two disciplines that are so far apart, one objective science, the other subjective mystical wisdom, saying the same thing, it should inspire you to know that there really is something out there, and you want to discover what it is, and how you can take your place in. At the end of the day, I really believe that the purpose of a human being is to spiritualize the material world and bring the experience of the material back to spirit. We are the bridge between those two worlds. And I think our purpose is eventually to bridge that world. And that's when the kingdom of heaven in the Bible arrives on earth. I do believe there could come a point where, when consciousness raises to that level, we become like we were in the very early days of souls entering this world, where we could probably project in and out of physical forms before we started to identify with the boundaries of our skin and got lost in the remembrance of what we really were. I believe we can get back to that state of consciousness. So that's really what it's all about. Hopefully, this book will help inspire people to get there.
Thank you, Peter. This has been an incredible conversation, and I hope it will make a difference in the lives of the listeners today. Remember, go to Amazon.com, get your copy of Quantum Spirituality. And what's the best way for people to get in touch with you, Peter?
Well, at my website,
Okay.
Peter Canova or Pope Annalisa, there's ways that they can communicate through there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very good. And
Facebook.
Yes, or Facebook. It's Peter Canova, and look for him online, petercanova.com, popeannalisa.com, and then go to his Facebook page, Peter Canova. I think it's author-and-speaker.com.
Yes, Peter Canova, author. Yeah.
Author, yes. Until next time, make sure that the conversations that you're having are making a difference in the lives of someone else. And Peter, I hope you'll come back again. More of this
Thank you.
conversation. Thank you.
Tune in next time for Conversations That Make a Difference with host Teresa Velardi every Tuesday at 5 a.m. and 5 p.m. Eastern, with live call-in shows every first and third Tuesday on syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network. Thank you for listening. And thank you to our producer, Rachel, and to our station owner, Deborah Beauvais, working behind the scenes. Be sure to go to conversationsthatmakeadifference.com for your free gift. Make sure your conversations make a difference.